In the classic print news story, I was in print originally, we were taught to structure the story so the most important information was the lead, and then in subsequent paragraphs would be less important, so that if the reader, dropped out at some point, third, fourth, 10th paragraph, that they would know what they needed to know. In many ways, structuring a story for broadcast is the other way around. You're telling a story. You may not reveal, and some of the stories I'm going to show you will show this, the most important news until subsequently in the story, to build a kind of dramatic narrative to that story. And of course, to state the very obvious point, it's a visual medium. You want the pictures to tell the story as much as possible. You want the pictures to complement what you are saying. I remember when I started off at Channel 5 a long time ago, and I had come from a print background, one of the producers said to me, and I had done a story involving a murder, and I described a survivor, one of the family members, as being very distraught. I remember the producer, he pulled me aside later and said, "Listen, Claiborne, this is TV, you're not writing for a newspaper. Show the person and let that communicate that the person's distraught. You don't have to say, show a distraught person and say, this person is distraught. Here's a smiling, laughing person, this person is happy." I had to learn all of this from the beginning, because I was still wedded to the idea of print, where you had to describe everything. Use those images, use natural sound without narration to tell the story or advance the story. Some of the things you need to be aware of in news, but this is applicable also to what you're doing. What's the story? What's the story? When you get assigned a story, try to imagine, someone once said to me, what's the headline? In a simple, pithy phrase, what is this story about? A bomb blew up in Afghanistan, happened today, 80 people were killed. Tiger Woods was arrested for DUI yesterday, or the day before. Greg Allman of the Allman Brothers died. These are the headlines. A suicide bomber blew himself up, killed 22 people at an Ariana Grande concert in Manchester. Story could be as simple as, I did a story a couple of years ago. I love doing this story. Discovered it by accident. And feel free if you want to do the same story. It's about a guy who I happened to run into at Citi Field. I'm a Yankees fan. I happened to be at Citi Field by an accident, invited by a friend. I saw a pillar, one of the structural pillars, and it had an old brown sepia tone photo of a guy in a military uniform. And I looked at that picture, and I looked over at this usher, and he was a very old guy, and I looked, and he kind of drew himself up proudly. He had his combat medals on in his usher's uniform. I said, "Is that you?" Turned out this guy was 95 years old. He had been an usher at Citi Field from the day the Mets started playing at the old Shea Stadium for 50 years. Went back and did a story about the guy. Is it as important as 80 people being blown up in Afghanistan? No, but it's a story. Stories are about our community, characters in our community, and they're also news. He's still out there, I think, by the way. A good guy. So what's the story? What are the facts? What are the facts about the story? What do we know and what do we think we know, and separate the two? If it's the police say something, then say the police said something. You don't know what happened. If you listen to the police version of what happened to Eric Garner, that's a very different story than what that videotape ended up showing. I'm going to show you that story too. Who do I need to talk to? You're doing your documentary on tyranny. I mean, you got to think, who do I need to talk to tell this story? Who are the essential characters? Can I tell this story through a character rather than just reporting what happened? These are much more compelling broadcast audio-visual stories if you can tell the news through someone who exemplifies what happened. If it's a story about Manchester, talk about what happened, of course. If you can find a family, a survivor, someone who was there when it happened, or someone who was searching for a family member and found them or didn't find them, that more vividly exemplifies the story you want to tell, other than just, well, 22 people were killed and we believe this is what happened. It's emotional. You know, one thing I learned early on was while newspapers can pack a lot more information into a story, the advantage of the broadcast medium is that we can communicate emotion in a way that print cannot. What's the first thing you want to do when you get to the scene at this fire? What's the first thing as a reporter and with your camera crew? What do you want to do? What, you want to get footage? Yeah, but who do you want to talk to? Look, the police aren't going anywhere. The fire department, they're going to be there. They're going to brief you. You know, they're at some point. You want somebody to tell you, you know, were you there when this broke? What did you see? What happened? Also, witnesses tend to disappear pretty quickly. And when you're talking to someone, it's interesting how a witness will sort of absorb somebody else's observations. I remember back when I was at the Daily News, I used to go cover fires, and I'd go to the Bronx, say, and ask, hey, what happened? And a kid would say, well, you know, blah, 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 the fire broke out, and I saw a guy run down the stairs. And I said, did you see that? No. So somebody told me that happened. So, you know, you want witnesses who actually witness what they say they saw. Those are the good witnesses. And like I said, they disappear quickly, but you want that vivid first impression. What happened? What did you see? What did you think? What did you do? I mean, this was an amazing, as you'll see from some of the video, where this fire started small, spread, and there were people jumping out of windows, coming down the fire case. There's a guy, and you see the video of him, who was an off-duty, I believe an off-duty fireman, who went up the fire escape while this building was just about ready to completely be consumed, and just got out of there in time. You want people to tell you, what did you see? Do you have video? Everybody's got a iPhone now. It's amazing. Used to go, you know, depend on, if you got there early, you got the video. If you didn't, you're SOL. Now you say, hey, do you have it on your, I mean, it's become an odd situation. I covered the, you remember the Philadelphia building collapse next to a Goodwill about 2 years ago? The building collapsed and people actually took out their iPhones and started shooting video and then went to help people. Oh, shoot. Yeah. The interview is the most essential element of any story, and I took some notes, put some notes down there, that you do, whether it's a documentary, feature story, or whether you're doing your own show like this gentleman here. Interview it's everything. Gathering facts is important to news. Interviewing people is essential to telling a well-told story about people, or interviewing someone for your show or your documentary. And the first point I made here, well, for your shows you do live here, is not applicable. In fact, it's the other way around. I said, when you introduce yourself, when you meet someone, a witness to a story, introduce yourself. Somebody, a cameraman once taught me, if you're trying to get man-on-the-street interviews, as we call them, if you say who you are first, it's harder for someone to actually decline you, which is interesting. If you say, I'm from ABC News, and I'd like to ask you about, you know, climate change, Paris, a lot of people, I'm in a hurry. Especially, it's become more and more common in New York. I don't have time. I got to go somewhere. If you say, I'm Ronnie Bass from ABC News, I'd like to ask you a question, more people will stop because it's more disrespectful once someone has said who they are to keep going. So it's a little trick you may want to employ. No, I think that in some ways that hurts. They hear ABC News, they don't want to. But if you're a person, if you can make the personal connection, that's more important than the credential.
If you're doing man-on-the-street interviews, do you have to have them sign the confidential release?
If you only with children.
Okay.
You know, technically, I think you could make a case, but I've never seen it. And they do it with children sometimes anyway. I don't call a person by their first name just because it's not my thing. My parents are from the South, and it's disrespectful to someone you just met to start saying, hey, I don't mind if you want to call me Ron, that's cool. But I did an interview with even Derek Jeter last summer. And the first thing I said to him was, should I call you Mr. Jeter or Derek? He thought it was ridiculous. But I didn't want to do, you know, hey, Derek, you know, da, da, da. And even if it's presumptive, I think so. Most people don't, but I tend to err on the side of thinking it's presumptuous. And let them tell you it's okay, you know, to call me by the first name. But that's a Southern thing, Ronnie, you know what I mean? No, Northerners, they don't believe that. It's like, my name's Michael. Hey, Mike! This may be obvious, but don't be confrontational. Interview to the extent possible, and it's hard when you have a camera there because people are often aware of the camera. Try to make a personal connection and don't get in someone's face, even if you think what they're saying is ridiculous. Even if you find that, look, if they're saying something, they're ranting and raving like a maniac, obviously you end the interview. But if you're a Hillary Clinton supporter and you're talking to a Donald Trump supporter, I covered John McCain. I was dealing with people whose, you know, political views I didn't entirely agree with all the time. You don't want to get in. You're working. You're not. You know, you're not in a barstool argument with the guy next to you. You're trying to elicit their opinions and thoughts and understand what they're saying, not debate them. Bad idea. Don't ask leading questions. Let people tell you in their own words. Don't go in there and say, hey, are you angry? Were you scared? How did you feel? Yeah. What were you thinking? What was going through your mind at the time? And again, I talk about if you're talking to victims or sympathizers, give them space, be respectful, and really hard thing is talking to someone who's lost a relative. And I find one way to sort of break the ice, and I've never had a problem with it, ask people responding this is, tell me something about that person. What did she like to do? What were her hobbies? And that, you know, shows you're interested. I am interested in people.